Managing Director for Nokia here in Australia, New Zealand, and we also cover the Pacific Islands. Many of you will know the name Nokia, and if anybody saw the recent launch or relaunch of the 3310, you might have been looking back 10 years ago and thinking, well, that's wonderful. Nokia as a name for most people is about mobile phones, but actually what we do today is quite different. So what I want to do today is explain a little bit about Nokia, what it is today, the context of 5G, IoT, and what we're doing, and I want to show you some real-world examples of how we're applying 5G and IoT technology in Nokia today. So a little bit of a relearning of Nokia. Now, do I have a... There we go, look at this. So, actually, Nokia is about 151 years old this year. It goes back a long way. And we have 4 real key values, and one of them is renewal. And in the last 10 years, we've been through a lot of renewal. We've been through acquiring companies such as Motorola Networks, acquiring Alcatel-Lucent last year. But we've also been doing something in the background, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, which is acquiring some interesting devices, not phones, but actually devices like smartwatches, like hospital-grade sensors, like virtual reality cameras, professional virtual reality cameras. And here's 2 examples, the Ozu and we just acquired Withings some time ago. So we're going through a period of renewal and trying to make sure that we get a good view of the IoT market, and especially when we talk about 5G. So, now I'm an engineer by trade, and I know a lot of people will explain to you a lot of things about 5G. I hope there are some engineers in the audience. I wanted to explain my view of 5G and what it is. It's a very simple view, but it's an interesting view. So, if you look on this graph here, R1 is kind of where we are today. That's what we have in the capabilities in most of your phones, where for a site and the connection to that site, to that phone, we can support hundreds of users to that base station, but we can also support multi-megabit speeds. It's kind of a nice area. What 5G gives us is actually something more than that. What we actually do is extend the number of devices that you can support in a single site to actually the tens of thousands, and actually slightly beyond that. But we also want to cover some of the lower data rates, and I'll explain why low data rates are quite important as an attribute in 5G. So this is the area R3. Then we have R4, which most people get confused with. Why would you want to support hundreds of users at kilobit per second rates? And you'll see in an example later on where this is very important to IoT, because what we can do in that area is we can actually make the round-trip time, response time to the network very, very fast in a couple of milliseconds, which means we can support some very interesting applications that I'll talk about. And then, of course, we want to make sure that you continue consuming your data on your phone and you just get more speeds, which is this area R2. Now, for the engineers amongst you, you're probably looking at that and saying, well, yes, I understand that. 5G is R1, where we are today, plus R2, plus R3, plus R4. But what about that R5 area? That sounds really fantastic. Tens of thousands of users and gigabits. And if you're a good engineer, you know you can't go there. That's what we call the Shannon limit. So what we're trying to do in 5G is effectively cover quite a wide range of use cases. Why is this important? Because when it comes to IoT, 5G provides you 3 key things in our mind. 1, a better speed to your mobile, but that's not the most important one. The second one is this latency, instant action. Sometimes, actually in a lot of situations, you need to react very, very fast in a network. It's not about the speed or the number of users you support. It's about being able to make sure that that driverless car takes action before it hits something else, as an example. It's about connectivity. You already heard IoT Alliance there, very interesting presentation on the number of devices we're connecting. And if we're going to support that, that density of devices, we need to have infrastructure that will be able to support that number of users per cell site. So there's the massive machine communication part of that. So really 3 key areas that we think 5G is going to give us. These are the precursor to what we call IoT. However, IoT is also the precursor to what we see as a fundamental change going on in the industry today. IoT is really something, once you have the sensors, you have the connectivity, what we believe at Nokia is that it's actually going to lead to what we call a programmable world. For a lot of people, it's quite frightening. You know, I have kids, and it is quite frightening when you look at what we can do, and I'll show you some examples with a programmable world. But if you have the sensors, the connectivity, the applications and the analytics behind that, and the feedback loop, something very interesting happens. We can do things which humans have been doing for quite a while, which actually are not that efficient with a human. So, what does this programmable world give you when you have this feedback loop? Well, you've already heard a lot of these stats, but a lot of people will talk about a programmable world and what happens to jobs. I want to look at what happens to humanity when we get that programmable world. You know, fatalities in car accidents and slow car reaction, 90% of all accidents are because of that. I can see the day that my kids won't have to take a driving test. And I think that's not far around the corner. You look at just energy consumption and what we do and the impact you could have with IoT and connecting, for instance, the HVAC systems in the US, 50% efficiency improvements by doing that. So these are all kinds of use cases from a human perspective which we think are really important. Now, it's not just about a vision of what we want to do. There is reality. We have launched the Nokia Patient Care Solution. So in the Nokia family today, we have the sensors. So that is the smartwatches, you know, measuring all kinds of health negatives. We have the temperature sensors, the blood pressure monitors, and we're now building industrialized devices for hospitals. But it's not just about the device, as I said. There's the connectivity of these devices as well. So once you have that, we've also built a data acquisition engine called Impact, which brings all this in. We've also built some analytics and insights behind that, and then a care app for hospitals and health staff. So it's an end-to-end ecosystem that Nokia is trying to provide, and we believe this is really going to help extensively healthcare in quite a big way, because suddenly now we can have people remote from the hospital called in when they needed to be rather than coming in at a regular time. If you just look at what we can do with some of these devices and some of the savings that you can achieve economically by having remote patient care, it is really quite remarkable. So that's an example of where today we're applying IoT in an end-to-end sense in Nokia. Someone earlier on mentioned about driverless cars. Driverless cars are really getting quite exciting and actually, in my view, quite different to how people imagine them. Most people, when you talk about a driverless car, look at that Google car that you've probably all seen, and what they see is those two things rotating, and they think there's a big compute engine there, and the car is making a decision on what to do next. Yes, but to be a true driverless car, you need to have the network connectivity of that car. You need to be able to look ahead 5 cars and look behind 5 cars. You need to have very, very fast turnaround, so we call mobile edge computing. Very first turnaround of the analytics of how you do that driverless car, and you need to be connected. It's not one user and the impact on the network, it's all users and how they impact each other going forward, which really matter in driverless cars. So Nokia is part of the 5G Automotive Association, and it's an alliance of telecom manufacturers and car manufacturers who are now putting communication connectivity and IoT and high-speed communications, low latency communications into cars to be able to help make sure that we have a true driverless experience going forward. And there are various aspects to that. It's not just about you know, you have the low latency very time-sensitive information, such as hazard warnings, collision warnings. If you remember back to that 5G IoT graph, where I put those low data rate, low number of users, but very low latency communications. You then have the traffic efficiency, navigation, e-tolling, and traffic information, and then you have infotainment, which is becoming a big part of driverless cars going forward. What are you going to do if the car's driving for you going around? You need to have some kind of infotainment system. So we're working across with the car industry to introduce that. We've started trials in Germany on the autobahns there of some of this technology, and we'll be slowly developing that out going forward. So conscious of the time, I just want to finish up with something. So Nokia is not quite the Nokia as you know it. If I still ask my wife, what she thinks Nokia does, and she still tells me it's mobile phones. It's not. Nokia is an infrastructure player in Australia. We're a fairly large employer. We employ more than 1,000 people, and we do more than $1 billion a year in revenue. But we're a major infrastructure player. It touches your lives if you live in Australia extensively today. 5G is not just about getting a better speed to a device. It has a lot to do with low latency and mass communications, and that's why we need 5G. We believe that 5G will drive IoT going forward, together with sensors, which are a very, very important part of that. That will then drive quite an interesting new era, we believe, in automation, with machine intelligence and feedback, which we think will have some profound effects on humanity. And this programmable world, we think, will start changing economics significantly as well. There's not much study done on 5 years or 10 years from now how IoT is going to change the economics of the world system, but we believe it will. We're already innovating. We've launched our Nokia healthcare solution and the devices. We're involved in some of the driverless cars, and I think these are just 2 examples of some of the verticals that we're working in now to be able to go and drive IoT and 5G innovation.